That's right. The Cincinnati locker room remains open with available student athletes until 3:50. We're joined right now by Associate Head Coach Larry Davis. Coach Davis will take your questions. If you have a question for Coach, please raise your hand. Our microphone attendant will make their way in your direction. Remember to please state your name and media outlet before presenting your question to Coach Davis. And we're looking for question number 1 right now. There's one on the right side toward the back.
Larry, the general manager's in the locker room talking to media, and he said that he's allowed you like the jockey. He's just letting you take the reins and run your own race. That he's not going to be a bug in your ear during the games. How's that work for you?
Well, I think one of the greatest things that Coach did was he trusted me early on. Now, we have grown up, known each other for a long time, and we have commiserated about basketball way before I ever worked for him. And so our philosophies are very similar. And when it all happened, one of the things he said is, look, early on, I'm going to stay away from practice. They got to hear your voice. They got to get used to you. And he used to text me all the time, trust yourself. Trust yourself. You know what you're doing. Trust yourself. I trust you. Trust yourself. And, we talk about this team and about scouting and about all those things every day. But what has allowed me to do is think clearly and not worry about, well, what's Coach thinking or what would he do? And certainly, those things come in my mind in terms of our philosophy, where we at. But it allows me to be me, and allows, I think, for me to think clearly, which is what you have to be able to do if you're going to get your team to win.
Next question's on the left side of the center aisle.
Gary Graves, AP. How much scouting did you do from last night's game? I mean, did your staff do from last night's game? And if you had a chance to watch, what really stood out about Kentucky's play last night that you really have to gear up for?
Well, we watched between the time we got back and 3 or 4 in the morning. We watched a lot of tape on a lot of people playing them. And last night's game was, you get a chance to scout them live a little bit. You get a chance maybe to pick up a play call or two. But at this day and age, most of your scouting is done off the tape. Because you can really break a lot of things down. It's much easier. Obviously, they got tremendous size and athleticism and length. Their rebounding is a real problem for everybody, and being able to keep them off the backboard is a huge problem. Obviously, you can't give them transition. If you turn the ball over against them, they are great at finishing because they've got 8 or 9 guys that are pro prospects, and they're going to go finish it on you if you turn it over and get them in open court. So, keeping them out of transition and keeping them off the backboard is 2 of the biggest concerns that we have. And, how we handle that probably will determine what the game's like.
Next question's on the right side toward the back.
Larry, John Clay with the Herald-Leader in Lexington. My understanding is you were born in Mount Sterling and then moved to Indiana. And also, can you talk about, you went to Asbury to play basketball, but you end up not playing basketball. Is that correct?
Yeah, the church I went to in Selma, Indiana, the pastor's son ended up going to Asbury, and he was a little older than I was. And coming out, I had some baseball scholarships and some small college basketball scholarships. Wasn't thrilled about any of them, and most of the small college stuff is you're getting part of your stuff paid for. So he said, well, why don't you come down here? He said, they're getting ready to start basketball. He said, they're getting ready to start an intercollegiate basketball team. He said, come down. He said, you can be on the first team and all that. And I was excited about that, went down there, and they ended up not starting until after I graduated, actually. So I didn't get a chance to play in college basketball. We had one of the most unique, I always said Sports Illustrated should do an article on this. We had a thing called class basketball. The freshman class, the sophomore class, the junior class, and the senior class all had a team with a coach, with uniforms. Every Friday night, you rotated. The sophomores played the juniors played the seniors, so forth. And we actually played like a 16-game schedule, which was nuts. We should have just had an intercollegiate team. But, that was the basketball for me in college, and AAU basketball in the summertime and that kind of stuff. And But I actually went there because they were going to start it. They didn't, and they have since started it. So, you know, I always say this. I think, you know, people out there, my dad has taught me a lot of things, and one thing he taught me is, son, you can do anything you want if you're willing to pay the price, scrap, and fight for it. And I wasn't a guy that was born from a coaching standpoint with a silver spoon in my mouth. I didn't play at North Carolina or someplace, and somebody said, well, hey, we'll give you an assistant's job when you first get out, all that. I fought my way up the chain and ladder. Mick Cronin fought his way up the chain and ladder. And I think our team reflects that because of that was our experience, that nothing was given to us in terms of a head start. I got my first job in college because I showed up at the guy's office for 7 straight days when he told me he didn't have a job, no grad assistant, anything else. I kept showing up at 8 o'clock in the morning. Finally, he said, if you'll not come again next week, if the grad assistant doesn't show up, I'll give you the job. That's the true story. And I just kept showing up. He goes, what are you doing here? I said, I want a job. I want to coach. He said, I don't have anything for you. I said, but Coach, I'll do anything. I'll do anything. Nope, no job. Next morning, I was there again, waiting on him with a paper, handed to him. Hey, what are you doing here again? I want a job. And finally, he relented. The guy didn't show up. I worked for $1 my first year, $1 my first year. He paid me that so I could get my tuition at East Tennessee State was waived because if they paid me something, they would waive my tuition for graduate school. And again, Mick was the same way. Mick was the son of a high school coach. You know, he fought his way into coaching by bugging Coach Huggins to let him on the staff and showing he was worthy to be on the staff. And when he got his advantage, he took advantage of it. That sucker rode guys to 5-star basketball camp, to be part of 5-star basketball camp. Again, we were 2 guys that fought our way up. And again, I think that's why our team does what they do.
All the way on the right side.
Brian Winter, Wave 3 News here in town. Coach, being born here in Kentucky, also coaching here in Kentucky years back, did you grow up a fan? Were you ever a fan of the Cats?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to say I wasn't. When I was little, my dad was a huge Kentucky fan. I mean, we listened to it on the radio. You know, if you're born in Kentucky, you're either a Louisville fan or Kentucky fan, or they shoot you. Yeah, you know, I grew up, and when I was in college, I was 15 miles from Lexington. So, and I had some friends there in college whose father had some tickets, and we went any chance we could. You know, we followed the national championship team with Goose Gibbons and those guys. And so I've always had a lot of respect for Kentucky basketball. But you know what? I got just as much Kentucky respect for Cincinnati basketball and the tradition and things that Cincinnati has done over the years. And, you know, we've got a great, rich tradition as well.
If you have a question for Coach Davis, please raise your hand. Any further questions for Coach? Yeah, there's one on the right.
So what did you live off that $1? How long did that thing go?
A lot of ramen noodles. A lot of ramen noodles. Well, you know, obviously I had to work part-time and you know, do some other things. And and was able to survive.
On the right side in the back.
Larry, with this team after you took over, when Mick's problem came up and he wasn't able to coach, was there one specific thing that you wanted to get across to show that you were now the guy in charge, or was that a gradual thing of how it happened?
Well, you know, early on in the first time that I walked out, you know, I didn't get a prep any for the VCU game. That game was surreal in that, you know, Coach told the team a couple hours beforehand, not by his choice necessarily, but that's just a circumstance that happened. I knew the night before. After that game, in the first team meeting, the first practice, I said, hey guys, look, I don't like the circumstances in which I'm here, but this is the hand we're dealt, and you guys got to understand, this is the way it's going to be. I'm now in charge, and I'm going to lead you, and things are not going to change. We worked too hard to build this program. I've helped Mick too hard, and he's built too long. It's not going to crumble and fall apart. We are going to keep doing things the way we do them, and if you don't like it, there's the door, and you'll have to get out of it. And you know, I think early on the guys understood that things are not going to change. We're going to stick to our tradition of defending and rebounding and playing really hard and being coachable, because that's the foundations that Mick built this program on and will always have in place. We talk about it all the time. You can't lose your culture. If you lose your culture, once you establish something, and you see it all the time, you see programs that all of a sudden that were winning, they fall apart, and it's because they lose their culture. And one thing I determined early on, we weren't going to lose our culture. And Mick and I talked about that a lot. That was the most important thing. Forget the wins and losses. Don't lose your culture of who we are.
On the right side, Nancy.
Nancy Armour, USA Today Sports. Larry, I apologize if you've been asked this already, but does it make it easier or harder having Mick there as a resource? And, you know, yes, it's your team, but you know that he's there. You can go to him. He comes to you. He'll text with the players. Is that a help, or has that made it occasionally challenging?
Well, let's make this clear. It's our team. It's not my team. It's our team, which includes Coach Cronin, Coach Savino, Coach Jackson, Coach Berger, TJ, and Greg, our grad assistant. It's everybody, and Coach Parker, our student, who's a former player. So it's our team, and it makes it easier. I mean, you know, Mick is a great coaching mind, and you know, we don't bump heads. We're in this together, and that's how we approached it when I was the assistant and he was the head coach, and now he's the GM and I'm the head coach until he gets healthy. We've been working together. We don't bump heads.
On the left side of the aisle.
What was your conversation with Octavius Ellis after the game? I mean, did you kind of talk with him about trying to keep his head in the game and not let emotion, you know, get the best of him, or let his physicality get the best of him in a moment like that, and especially now with what you face with Kentucky?
Okay, and don't take this personally, okay? In all due respect, he didn't do that intentionally. If anybody said he did, I'll call him a liar, okay? Did he go to block out and raise his bow and put it in the guy's chin? Absolutely he did, and he would tell you he did that. He didn't do that on purpose to hit the guy. It was going to be a physical game. We knew it from the minute we got the draw and we started looking at the tape. We pounded in our guys' heads. You better be ready for the fight in this one, fellas. You better be ready to play physical on the offensive end and the defensive end if you want to have a chance to win. And Octavius didn't do that on purpose. He felt terribly that he got ejected from the game for his teammates. But I can tell you, tomorrow, he will go to block out physically. He will try to watch his elbow and not get it up in somebody's face because, again, if that happens and they view it that way, just like if they view a Kentucky player doing the same thing, they'll probably eject them. So, but I want to make it clear, Octavius he wasn't trying to headhunt the guy and bow him in the face on purpose. That didn't happen. What happened was it was a physical game and he went to block out. The very next play, a Purdue player, okay, passed the ball and then went like this and hit Corey DeBerry in the mouth. They deemed that one wasn't intentional. That's their decision. That ain't my decision. All I do is coach. But that happened, and you can watch the film and watch it happen. Did the kid mean to hit Corey in the mouth? Probably not. Probably not. But he hit him. And again, I'm not saying the official should or shouldn't have called it that way. I'm just telling you that Tay didn't do that intentionally. That was just physical play, and he got his elbow too high and caught him. And on film, I'm sure it looked bad. I mean, as I looked at it, it looked bad. But it wasn't in his mind, hey, I'm going to go drill this guy because I'm emotionally. If you understood where Tay came from, okay, and I don't know if you guys know his background and circumstances. He watched his mother die at 11 years old and has had anger issues for a while. He's got those under control. Trust me, he has those under control. Because I saw him at a time in his life when he didn't, when we started recruiting him. And Tay has come so far, and he is so conscious of it, that's why I know that didn't happen.
If you have a question for Coach Davis, please raise your hand. We have a few more minutes for questions. There's one in the back on the right side.
Larry, how well do you know John Calipari, and what do you think? I mean, how do you feel about him with strengths and so forth as a coach?
I've known John for a long, long time because we both worked 5-star camp for many, many years together, and you know, I've seen him, obviously, his career, come up through his career. Obviously, I have great respect for him. I mean, he's done a great job. People don't understand that, you know, everybody thinks, hey, you got all these All-Americans and all these future pros, and it's just, you just throw them out there and it's easy. It's not easy. It's not. I coached at Oak Hill Academy, where I had 6 or 7 high Division I players the 2 years I was there. It's not easy to mesh those egos, and he's done a good job with that. And you know, he's won every place he's been. You got to respect him as a coach. And you know, one thing that I do like about John, he speaks his mind. He doesn't hold back, and you know, he isn't always politically correct because he says what's on his mind, and you know, that's refreshing in today's coaching. But he's done a good job with his team and meshing the egos and the guys. You know, he's got a lot of good players. He got arguably 8, 9, maybe 10 pros, and but that's not as easy as you think it is. Now the flip side of that is he got a lot of guys who can really play.
We have time for one final question, if there is one. If there are a final question for Coach Davis, just raise your hand. With no final questions, we'd like to thank Coach Davis for joining us here in the main interview room. The Cincinnati locker room is closing in about 1 minute.